Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 99. And in today's episode, we're going to continue talking about job hazard analysis, and we're going to go over a couple of practical examples. I've been trying to stress the let's take the things we talk about and put it into practice, as opposed to it's something we talk about in theory, because I really think that these are great tools that we can use. But like all things, the tool has to work for you. So we'll sit down, we'll kind of go over a couple of practical examples and all that good stuff then. Please do everything you can if you think this is going to work to steal it, use it for yourself, all that good stuff. But again, it's got to be something that you can integrate with what you have, unless of course you're really starting with like nothing. And then it's pretty simple to come up with your own system. Many of us are inheriting the system that's already there, and the system can only take so much change. So I've done a great job of just talking at this point. So let's just dive right into it then. So in today's for the job hazard analysis, the practical is we're going to look at the 5x5 risk assessment matrix. We're going to use that as our template for this. Again, you can use the 3x3, the 4x4. You can make up your own, whatever kind of works, But for me, this works great for me. So I'm not saying that this is the end all be all. It has to work for you. So let's just dive right in then. So as we look at our 5x5, I'm going to kind of speed up some just so I'm just not wasting everyone's time. We talked about this in previous episodes, but when we look at the likelihood and consequences, it goes from low to high. And if you think about a golf score, you want your golf score to be as low as you possibly can. And so when we look at the 5x5, it's really easy. We want it to be a likelihood of low, 1 as much as possible, consequences 1 as much as possible then, because in the ideal world, you're never going to 100% outlaw these things, but I think we can do a great job of minimizing. So let's look at the first one, and for this example, what we're going to use is a step-by-step approach for the job hazard analysis, and this is one that I do at many of the places that I go to work. We're going to use sulfuric acid in this example. So if we look at the step-by-step, the first thing we're going to do is don the PPE. You can get hurt by doing that pretty darn low, of course, So we'll look at a consequence of 1 and a rating of, likelihood of 1, 2. And so the rating is going to be a 1. We're going to take the sulfuric acid, move it up from the storage to the chemical hood. So if you think about, you're going to move a gallon-sized container, like whether that be glass or plastic. Of course, plastic is a lot more forgiving than glass is. But whether you're going to move it from, the chemical storage to the hood, we now know that there's going to be more of a chance of likelihood because you're carrying the acid, you're walking with the acid, you're taking it to the hood, you're making sure the surface is clear, all that good stuff then. So not like this is hard, but again, we're adding in a little more chances of a likelihood and a consequence. So now if we do a 2 for the likelihood and a 2 for the consequences, we now have a 4 for the low. Let's talk about pouring the sulfuric acid into the beaker. Again, we have more of likelihood, more of the consequence then. So we're doing that now. We're going to perform the test and dispose of the acid in the acid drain on this one. So now we're then taking the sulfuric acid. I'm sorry, the previous step was we were going to pour it into a beaker. So we're taking the sulfuric acid from the gallon jug, pouring it into a beaker. The next one is we perform the test and dispose it down the drain. So we then have a likelihood of 3, consequence of 3, which is now a 9 of a medium. Next, we're going to place empty acid bottle in the area, which is going to be an area where you wash out acid bottles before you dispose of them. So then we have a likelihood of 3 because now we have probably have acid on our gloves. Doesn't mean that we do, but we probably do. But the consequence is going to be a lot lower. So now we have a consequence of 6. So because it's empty. That doesn't mean that you can't spill it. Doesn't mean you can't break it. But you know your consequences are less because you now have a pretty empty bottle. We can never say empty because it hasn't been washed and pH'd, and all that good stuff then. So next, we then come with remove acid contaminated PPE. So this is where we actually find our highest consequence here, because we know that we have it on our gloves. We know we have it on these places, and now we got to get these off of us without somehow having acid onto our hands or onto some other part of our body as we take off this contaminated PPE. This now brings it to a 12, so we have likelihood of 3. Consequence is a 4, and then 12 as a medium rating is going to be the rating for this one then. So oddly enough, in this one, removing the contaminated PPE, of course, is going to be your let's call it your greatest likelihood and consequence then that you can have then. So let's go on and look at the next practical example here. This is called using a open laser beam. So, I'm sorry, open laser beam usage then. So this is basically when you have a laser that's shooting from point A to point B. I do everything I can to never do these operations. It always has to be in a enclosed environment, but there are places that they will use a open beam. So let's just kind of go through the example. So we're going to place the sample on the equipment. And of course, that's going to be just a likelihood of 1 and consequence of 1, pretty low. We're going to ensure the lab door is closed, and we don the laser glasses. Likelihood is 1, consequence is 4. So now we have a rating of 4. So we have a likelihood of 1, but if you don't do it right, the consequence, of course, is now starting to creep up there. So because now we're using this laser. Next step, we're going to engage the laser, which is basically a fancy way of saying we're going to turn on the key, we're going to press the start button, and so now you have a chance, of course, that you're, shooting this laser. So the likelihood is 2, consequence is 4, we now have an 8 then. So the next step is turning off the laser. So 1 and 1 for likelihood and consequence, very low rating here. And then finally we have a remove the laser glasses, take sample off of the equipment then, 1 and 1. The big thing that we have here, of course, is that as humans, many times we're flawed creatures. We forget to put the glasses on. Sometimes we grab glasses and they're not the right ones. Sometimes people are not aware and they believe that, oh, I can stand back, my eye has eye has that I-beam aversion, all that kind of stuff then. So we're starting to see where we can have a little bit more for consequence then in here. Look at another example here. Manually loading a tractor trailer with 50-pound boxes. So, and I just randomly chose 50-pound boxes. You could insert a 45, you could insert a 60, you could because many times it really depends, of course, obviously on the ergonomics of the situation as the person moves, not so much with everyday strength, although that does play a part in it. That's very hard to measure. So let's just look at the first step here. We're going to use the pallet jack, and we're going to move the skid of boxes to the truck. So pallet jack, lift up skid, move skid, likelihood of 3 and consequence of 3, so we have a rating of 9. So when we think about this, there's a lot of twisting, pulling, bending. Does the power jack, is it a manual power jack where you, the human, are using your legs and your back to pull this thing, or is it one that's a battery operated one? So there's a lot of different things in here. We're then going to move boxes from skid to truck. So likelihood is 4, consequence is 3, so now we have 12 for the rating. A lot of bending and twisting and all that stuff, which means that we're doing that activity a lot too. We're not doing it like 2 times a day. We're probably doing it every 15 seconds for a long time then. So third step, we use the power jack to move the empty skid. we now have a 1 and a 1. The skid is now empty. It's really easy to move the skid then, So now the likelihood is 1 and consequences 1. And then finally we stack empty skid on skid pile. Likelihood of 4 and consequences 3. So we end up with a 12 as a medium. Because not that we do it that often, of course, but the likelihood of you getting hurt by loading a skid, which typically 75 to 100 pounds, is going to be hard. A skid, of course, is different ergonomics and all the other stuff that goes along with this. Let's look at the next one, moving office furniture. And in this case, we're using professional movers in this. We're not using the everyday office folks, the IT folks, somebody that you think's not occupied enough. You just say, hey, we need you to move this stuff. So this is going to be professional movers. So they break down the cube walls, likelihood of 2, consequence of 2, the rating is 4. Moving the cube walls, 2, consequence is going to be 3, so now we have a 6. Moving a desk, which is now heavier, likelihood of 3, consequence of 3, we have a 9, which is low still. And moving the IT equipment. When you think about the computers, if you're going to do any servers, you have to pull out those individual modules. Those are about 150 pounds each. Move each individual module, move the server unit over, and then reslot and do all the cables on the back. So we have 3 and a 3 and a 9. So the important part is to keep in the professional movers on this one. So in this next one, we have the exact same scenario, but we use the office. We use the office folks. And not that the office folks should not be used, but we should also understand that because they don't do these operations all day, every day. They have a totally different level of training and competence on this whole thing then. So it boosts up all of the ratings by easily like 1 or 2. So now we have what used to be in the previous one pretty darn low is now at 8. So it's still low, but it's starting to creep up there. And then now we have a bunch of 12s for mediums now. Because when you're a professional, you do it all day, every day, you learn and all that stuff. You learn all the tips and the tricks. When you're an office person, you just don't have that same knowledge and experience base. And that is it, episode number 99, job hazard analysis then. So this is where we sat down, we covered a lot of practical examples in this whole thing. And at the end, we introduced the whole if a everyday office person is going to move furniture, as opposed to the professional movers out there then. So this is one of those areas that when you do a job hazard analysis, it's very hard to factor in. Because we use words in the safety field like competency, and we don't see it as a word that's very insulting. It means that you have the knowledge and the training and all that. But there's a lot of people that if you say, but you don't have the competency to do this, they just don't have the same kind of meaning out there then. So that is it for today's episode, number 99, Job Hazard Analysis. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Thank you for joining me today, and have a safe day.